just to give you a little bit about myself, I'm one of the co-creators of the Los Angeles Podcast Festival, which was the first ever podcast festival. I directed and produced Earbuds, the first ever podcasting documentary. And I've been a stand-up comic since I was 18, which means two things. I have no marketable skills, and I started saying I don't want to work in traditional anything because it wouldn't work for me. So I want to go into why my whole thing is when the gatekeepers tell you no, because I'll give you a little background. I started as a stand-up comic in 1988, and I was 18 years old. Don't do the math. I'm 30. Math joke, okay? And when I started in the late 80s, there was very traditional. The only way to make it as a stand-up comic was you worked around in the clubs and you got on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And if Johnny Carson, literally, if at the end of your set, if Johnny went, hey, come on, and called you to the couch, that was it. You got anointed. He waved his magic wand, and then show business went, okay, you're going to get a TV show. You're going to become famous. All the Jerry Seinfeld, everyone, they tell this story of that's what happened. Johnny called me to the couch, and bam. And so if you didn't get that, there was not a lot of opportunities for you. Now, as I started traveling around the country in the 90s and everything, cable TV started, there were some more opportunities, and there was more late night TV shows, but there were still all of these gatekeepers. And I moved out here, I was like in my early 20s, and I did everything you're supposed to do. I got on stage a million times a night. I got an agent, I auditioned, I did all those things you're supposed to do. I took acting classes, I took myself off the road so I could just completely immerse myself in show business, right? And I did all right. I did some pilots. I started hosting some game shows. Strip Poker on the USA Network. Yes, very awesome show. It was very culturally relevant. And no, it was beautiful people taking their clothes off and I made fun of them. That's what the show was. And then I did over 300 episodes of TV. And it was awesome. Here we go. I'm on my way. But I kept meeting the gatekeepers. They kept telling me I was so dependent on one or two people. Literally, I was on this show on the Game Show Network, and the head of the network told me, Graham, you're part of the family. I was just joking about this before stepping up here, and then it's almost like your family going, oh, you know what, son? You're not generating enough revenue for this family, so you need to pack it up and go. And the show got canceled. I mean, that kept happening. The vice president loved the show. Him and the president had a fight, and I'm done. And then all these people, then I'm sitting there at the mercy. I, again, am at the mercy of all of these people. And who are owned by massive corporations. There's 5 multinational corporations that own 95% of all media. So I was like, wow. And then kept trying to go through that and trying to do everything I'm supposed to do. Oh, write a spec script and pitch it around and do all this stuff I'm supposed to do and create this thing. And the internet was starting and people were starting to put content on the internet. And it was like, even then, it was, hey, make something cool on the internet and then sell it as a TV show. And I was like, well, why don't we just make a TV show? But that was sort of the thinking. I was locked in that thinking, and the internet content, entertainment on the internet hadn't really taken hold yet. So I had a couple big life events. So 9/11 hit, and it really changed my view, as it did a lot of people. I started asking myself, what am I doing? I'm just this game show host, haha, jokes and party, and just go out and do shows and whatever. And I felt like, so I started volunteering and getting involved. And I think that for me, and I'll integrate this into the sec, being of service is really a key ingredient in doing what you love and being successful. Not just, I'm going to give you the, there's things you can do, but I think if you, on the business or the technical side, but if you're not passionate about what you're doing and there's not some element of service in it, of like, I got to make a contribution to this world in a positive way, then I think it's just, then you're still just chasing dollars. You're just chasing rainbows and dollars, in my opinion. So 9/11 happened, and I started to do volunteer work. I started to work with the American Red Cross and be a disaster volunteer, and I got to see Los Angeles in a way that really changed my view on a lot of things. And then cut to 2004, a comic that I knew from Chicago, because I moved here from Chicago, named Mike Burton. He had started sending comics to Afghanistan to entertain the military. And I was like, okay, I'm in, let's do this. And he goes, can you go next month? I was like, well, it wasn't that quick. I didn't want to, I was just talking. We were here at the Improv talking. I didn't want to commit to going into a war zone right now. And he goes, I go, how much time do you need? He goes, you got to give me 24 hours. The comic fell out, and the Department of Defense needs a month of background checks before we send you over there, so I need your decision in 24 hours. This was at the Hollywood Improv in July of 2004. The next day I was with my writing partner, and who's also my best friend, and I told him this, and he goes, oh dude, you gotta go. I go, what? He goes, you gotta go. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. And he goes, bring a camera. We'll make a documentary. I was like, what? Yeah, okay. So I said yes. And I brought a camera about the size of the one I'm using right now, but it was before. That's high def. That's a 4K camera. This is before. So I brought a little Sony Handycam into Afghanistan, and that was another life-changing moment. I was doing shows for the military, little fire bases, shows about this size, but imagine this is a tent, and you're all dirty, and it's hot, and you're carrying guns, and you're signed up to go fight the Taliban. And the response, I'm very liberal, I'm very left-leaning. I say that just to let you know that it opened not that I went there left and came back conservative, but I met people from all over the country and the world who were there in this war, and what brought them there, why they were there, the state of the world, and then the way they appreciated it. I'd always thought, I do game shows, I'm just whatever, I just didn't want to have a real job, I'm just like whatever, good time Johnny, woo, go to show business. And they would thank me for your show. They would come up and thank you, and I started to see the value of being a comedian and the entertainment value. And a commanding officer told another comedian friend of mine that whenever a comedy show comes through the fire base, the suicide rate drops. And I was like, oh, wow. So I made this movie, Afghanistan, and I made it. Laffghan Stan. I made this film. When I got back, and I've done 7 tours in Afghanistan and Iraq and Kuwait between 2004 and 2012. But I decided to make this movie because I came back and I was talking to the editor, and I was like, look, I don't have slick footage. I didn't even have a camera op with me, man. It was just me, and I would literally just turn the camera on and just start talking, and then I would, I'd set up a camera just on a tripod like this, and that's how I would shoot my shows or whatever, and I would do some interviews, and I said, we don't have the slick, nice footage. And I said, in any given day, 50 things would happen to you that would, if you told one friend back home, it would be a 20-minute story, you're never gonna believe what happened, but all these things would fly at you, and I was like, it was overwhelming going over there, especially as someone, I didn't come from a military family, I didn't have any military anything, and so Scott Morgan did this editing style where he layered all this stuff is flying at you, he took all these images and put it on the screen, and I said, this is awesome, and none of the festivals took it. None of the festivals took it. They all wanted more of a traditional documentary thing where you sit down and interview people, and then you show some news footage, and then you come back. And also it was 2004, Fahrenheit 9/11 had just come out. They very much wanted an indictment of Bush and these wars, which, not a fan of Bush, not a fan of those wars at all. But I was like, that's not the story I want to tell. And I could have changed the movie to fit the documentary film festival circuit, and maybe would have got some awards, and maybe would have got this and that, and gotten better distribution, but I just like, this is not the story I want to tell. I want to tell what I went through. I want people to see what being in a war zone is like through the eyes of a comedian. That's what I want to tell. That's the story I'm going to tell, because that's what I went through. And the movie was in one festival, the Albuquerque Film Festival, which is now out of business. And it was a friend of mine who ran the festival. And he said, Graham, I watched your movie the first time, and I was like, I don't know, this movie doesn't make any sense. And then I watched it again and said, this is the only way you can tell this story. It's the only way you can tell this story, and that's why I'm putting it in there. And one of my producer friends said, but how do we get people to watch the movie twice? And I said, and all these friends, people I like, trust, respect, successful filmmakers were like, do this, shoot this, do that, cut this, and I couldn't do it. And maybe my accountant would be happier or whatever, but it wasn't right. I had to do what was true to me, what I believed in, and I wasn't going to change the experience I went through to make it more marketable and more palatable. There's nothing wrong with making entertainment more marketable. There's nothing wrong with making it more financially viable, but if I'm doing something this personally, there's no way I'm going to do that. There's no way I'm going to do that. So that sort of started my trajectory on, I'm going to do things my way, however I artistically and creatively want to do it. Now, I wish I could say, and then the movie made $20 million. No, it did not. I went through bankruptcy and foreclosure, but that's a whole other keynote with a lot more swear words. So then we started, the podcasting started. 2006, 2007, a bunch of comedians started saying, hey, I found this podcast thing. There was this network that was trying to kind of be like MySpace with podcasting. It was called Now Live. And I did a podcast on it called Comedians in Combat, and every week I would interview comics who had been over there, because we all have insane stories. I was on a helicopter that came under fire, of rocket attacks. We all have insane, crazy stories. It's the most insane experience. You have no training, you're picked up from nice, glitzy Los Angeles, dropped into a war zone, and you're just like, ugh! And then you tell your jokes, and then you leave, and you come back, and you're just like at the beach going, what happened? Where was I? So I started interviewing these comics, but I didn't get it. I'll be very honest. I wish I could say, yeah, man, I got podcasting on day one, and then bam, started running. I didn't get it. I was still stuck in an old mindset. I was like, why am I driving? I live in Santa Monica. Like, why am I driving to the Valley to do some free radio show? I mean, it's cool talking to these comics, but who the hell is listening on the internet? When is this gonna? So I was like, that network went out of business, and so more people started doing podcasts. Friends of mine, Mark Maron, started doing a podcast, and it was like 2008 or 2009, and we were doing a show together, and he's like, yeah, man, I just started talking in my garage, and he goes, I started going on the road, and I go, is anyone buying tickets on the road? He goes, yeah, man. I goes, I'm not selling out the club. He's playing 200-300 seat comedy clubs at the time. He goes, I'm not selling out the club. But he goes, the first 2 rows are all podcast fans. They're all wearing my shirt. They bought the tickets early, and I was like, for real? He's like, yeah, all right, And then like my friend Doug Benson said that, and they were all like, oh, okay. And everyone was started to like, all right. And I had started this website called Comedy Film Nerds, where it was a bunch of stand-up comics just writing funny movie reviews with my business partner, Chris Mancini. We're both stand-ups. We both went to film school. And we would then go out and be guests on shows as the film nerds, as the comedy film nerds, the film experts. And we're like, okay, and everyone started going, you guys should do a podcast. We're like, all right, I guess. And I had a voiceover agent. So they showed me, I'm not technically savvy at all. This is something I cannot implore more. If you want to have a one-man band, you need to learn all of the instruments. Write that in all caps and circle it, okay? So I didn't know how to do any of this. I'm not a tech person. I wasn't the first kid with the computer in the neighborhood, not at all. So I had to learn how to record my voiceover auditions on a snowball mic, plugged into my laptop using GarageBand, turn them and convert them into MP3s, And my voiceover agent's assistant showed me how to do all this. And I was like, okay. And then I would sit in hotel rooms when I was on the road as a comedian during the day with a towel over my head. That was my sound studio. And reading voiceover audition copy. You know, like the all-new Ford Focus or whatever I was reading. And then I would email that from a Hampton Inn off a freeway in Appleton, Wisconsin, and let's hope we get the gig. The only time I got hired, coincidentally, they wanted me to cancel a tour going to Iraq. It was my first, and they're like, they all said that in the voiceover business, you got to audition for like 9 months to a year. Once you get that first one, then you're in. They love your voice. Month 7, 8, I got it. Here's the call. You're doing this video game. This is it. You're going to be this big voice in this some big whatever first-person shooter, go out and kill the apocalypse game or whatever. But they want you do it. And I was like, I'm going to Iraq on Monday. You got to cancel that. No, I don't. Maybe I'd be telling you right now I have this amazing voiceover career had I made a different decision. But I don't. But what I did learn from that was how to record a podcast. And I don't regret that decision at all. I don't regret that decision at all. Because going to Iraq is the most life-changing thing you could ever do in your life. And being the, I'm Sergeant McGunnigun in the video game, who whatever, so what. Because that's why there was a lot of those. There was a lot of either host boys or gritty gun guy, cop gun, soldier gun. So those are that's my voiceover reel. If you guys want it, it's right there. It is right there. Buy the all-new shiny thing that costs you a lot of money, or booze and guns. But I learned how to make a podcast, and I told Chris Mancini, I said, dude, let's just start doing this. I figured it out from doing all of these voiceover auditions. So at the end of 2009, we started doing the Comedy Film Nerds podcast, and that has now become the whole center of our business. We have an online store. We sell products. We bring comics on, and that's, again, the thing that traditional media is a competition, right? If I have a show at Thursday at 8 and you have a show at Thursday at 8, well, now we're fighting for viewers. And that was the thing. Podcast, you come on my podcast, your followers listen to me, my followers listen to you, boom, it's all good. And so then the stand-up comedy world, we all started helping each other out. And we come in, we were all recording in garages, in our homes, and above a 7-Eleven. I'm not making that up, It's just, I knew guys that were doing the show in Hawaii in an office of a strip club. Like, it was nuts. Everyone was just like, anywhere they could stand. It would work. I did one on the roof of a parking garage. These two women were like, yeah, we just like recording on the roof of a parking garage. You got it, man. So I learned, we all started doing our own thing, and we were like, well, this person, well, we spiked our numbers from doing this and that, so a community was built, which is something I cannot, whatever world you're in, whatever business you're in, there's a bunch of people that are all trying to figure out the same stuff. Get together with them and exchange ideas. The technology is changing every 3 seconds. Someone is figuring something out that you can go, oh man, that could really work for me. Someone is like, well, I tried this one thing with this whatever, and it's not, or now you've got Patreon. It's unreal. The stuff that is available to you is unbelievable. There are people now, I have a good friend of mine, Jimmy Dore, started his own YouTube show, and it was just him talking politics, and now he's got 360,000 YouTube subscribers. And we started doing stand-up together in Chicago 25 years ago. And he just sold out a 600-seat theater a couple months ago in Chicago. And I was walking to the theater with another guy that started with us doing comedy in the 90s in Chicago, and there was a line around the door, and I said, look at that. I go, that's YouTube. That's what's selling out this theater. And I said, there's other comics, like, and I named guys we know, Zach Galifianakis. I go, yeah, your sitcom could sell that out, your big movie career could sell that out, but YouTube's selling it out. He does that show in his garage, right? And he did it because he was passionate about it. He was like, I don't like the two-party political system, I'm a left, progressive, whatever, and he found that niche. The niche is where the money is. The niche is where sustainability is. The niche is where your passion is going to be. The niche is where everything is going to be. Find a piece of land that's a foot wide and dig for a mile. That's the key. It's easy to get spread out. It's easy to get spread out. This person's doing that. Well, I'm going to chase that. I've been guilty. Oh, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. Like I just told, I had game shows, voiceovers, whatever, man. I just got to pay my bills. Find the thing that is passionate and start doing it. So we just got in that attitude of we're going to create our own thing, our own way. And then I hear about this thing called Kickstarter. And then Dave Anthony comes to me and says, hey, no one's done a podcast festival. We should do it. So we raised the money on Kickstarter. Because going out and trying to get investors is great. If you got access to people with money, you got access to venture capitalists, fantastic. But there is nothing better than having the followers and the fans of what you're doing pay for it. They have ownership of it. They get involved and they're like, oh, I'm in. And so we raised the money for the Los Angeles Podcast Festival in the spring of 2012, and we put the festival on that fall. And one of the coolest shows I've ever done is introducing the Sklar brothers the opening night, and the fans were like, oh, they went nuts because they had an ownership of it. So then after that festival started going and we were building this community, that's the other thing. We built a community of people that loved podcasts. And then from there, it was, let's make a documentary about it. So we raised $140,000 on Kickstarter to shoot the Earbuds documentary, and we started getting in this mode of how can we do it? Because let me tell you something, the gatekeepers are going to tell you no, and when someone tells you no, it's because they can't do it. It's not because it's not possible, they can't do it. They don't want to do it, that's why they're telling you no. So you get in this attitude, we just got like, okay, we want to do a documentary. I'm not going to waste 6 months to a year trying to pitch this concept to money people. I just said, I'm going to take it to the podcast fans. And then we were guests on 30 podcasts, and we raised the money. And it funded with 30 minutes to go in the Kickstarter. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I'm almost died. The most stressful thing. But that was, we just got in this attitude of, okay, and one of the interviews, we interviewed this Australian, let me backtrack a little. We wanted to go to Australia and Japan. We did, the 140 grand was not enough. So we said, well, let's try to get some product placement. And again, a very good friend of mine, a woman I like and trust and respect, said, Graham, product placement is impossible. Unless you're the Marvel movies and you're doing a deal with Pepsi or whatever, it ain't happening. I was like, that sounds like a no. Got it, going right at it. So this company, Squarespace, that started giving a lot of money to podcasts in the early days, we went right to them. We had a great relationship with them, and we said, we want to interview in the movie. And they're like, I don't want some, whatever, like infomercial in them. And we're like, we don't want that either. It's got to be, you guys have helped podcasting grow. And we'll feature you, and how about kick in a little bit? And they went, yeah, and it worked, and it makes complete sense. And that was the money we needed to go to Australia and Japan, where we interviewed an Australian miner in the Australian outback who listens to podcasts. We interviewed this Japanese housewife who listens to Comedy Film Nerds and told us that when the hurricane, the tsunami and the earthquake hit in March of 2011 and Japan was devastated, Comedy Film Nerd fans jumped on Twitter and were asking her, hey, are you okay? Because we made her a part of the show. She would email us all the time. Her name was Sanai. We'd call her Sandy, big fan Japan. She was a part of the show. So we interviewed her. So she's telling this story in our documentary about these fans from the other side of the planet were worried about her in the middle of her husband, didn't know where her husband was. He was at work, didn't know if he was safe. She's at home just with her son. And it's one of the most touching, heartbreaking things I've ever been a part of. And it's all because we refused to accept no. We found every angle we could, we ran down every lead we could. We said, let's try this. If that doesn't work, we're going to try that. So that is my overall message that I want to get to you. And you might be like, well, Graham, I'm not a stand-up comic and not all these things. I get that. What I'm saying is whatever you're doing, whatever business it is, whatever your passion is, there's a bunch of people online, whether you know it or not, that are ready, that are down with it. There's a website. If not, create one, right? If no, hey, find the thing. Well, no one's ever done fill in the blank. That's the thing you should be doing. That's absolutely the thing you should be doing. After the election, I was pissed off and I said, I need to talk about politics. And I started a YouTube, my YouTube channel was barely had anything on it. In January 1st, 2017, it had 164 subscribers. Now it's got just right around 10,000. And I did that starting, and again, I started talking into my iPhone, sitting at my kitchen table, reading the newspaper, going, and I was just like, I don't care if this is good. I'm just pissed. I'm going to talk, and that's what's going to happen. And that's how I built the show. And I did the same thing. I already knew the model. So I started being a guest on other political YouTube shows, and I'm on regular on the Young Turks and on Jimmy. That's how I did it. The model's the same. I know, and then I heard about Patreon. Jumped on that immediately. Patreon is the greatest thing that I've ever seen invented. It is the smartest thing. They took crowdfunding and they took social media and they put it together. And they have these forums that are there for you because they want, of these Patreon people who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a month. This guy posted, when I first got Patreon, he goes, when I want to post on social media, I do it to Patreon first because they're paying me. And I was like, oh. So this wacky photo of me in the thing with the thing, put that on Patreon for the people that give me some money every month. So I just want to, and you can ask questions in a second. I hope this has been helpful and eye-opening, and everything I'm doing it because I'm passionate about it, because I love it and I want to do it. Look, if NBC comes to me and says, Graham, be in this sitcom, Buddy the Wacky Neighbor, okay, fine, but I'm not wasting time chasing that shit down, I'll tell you that right now. I'll come out and be like, hey, wacky neighbor, whatever you want me to do, and that money will go to fuel all the projects I really want to do. So, thank you so much, and if you want more information, go to grahamelwood.com, my website. Thank you. Okay, we'll do Q&A. My first question, can we turn up the air conditioning? Thank you! You guys are the best! Alright, anyone have a question? Alright, I'm gonna just tell road stories. One time I was in a comedy condo and the headliner was doing blow. Okay, yes, right here.
How long did it take you to start to build? Hi. How long did it start, or how long did you have a podcast before you started to build a meaningful audience that was actually a community that supported you?
I would say it took us maybe 6 months. The advantage we have is, Chris and I, my co-host, we both have been comics a long time, so we know a lot of people, Aisha Tyler, people like that already had massive followings. So we would that's the key. And if you're like, again, I don't have a big following, I'm not an entertainer, find someone that knows someone that can get someone on your show and just reach, there's the worst thing that can happen is they don't respond. So we would just get this big name person on our show, and you always let them plug. Like, you got a thing coming up? Do a little research. Hey, I see your movie's coming out next month. Do you want to come on our show to plug it? They're probably going to say yes. And the thing about, you can work it around their schedule. So it took us about 6 months, and we engaged the listener. We would read their emails. Because we're talking movies, so we would have a discussion and really let them take ownership of it.
I like that answer.
Sweet. Who else? Yes.
What's the most counterintuitive or surprising thing you've learned that you can share with us to try?
I think the most counterintuitive, and again, it just sort of comes from the generation of comics that I came up in, was we were just taught, trained, well, we gotta go to we got to pitch this to the network. We got to take this to the, like, that felt so counterintuitive initially. It was, oh, I have to get someone else in a position of power who can greenlight stuff, who has access to money or whatever. I need them. It's almost like, in therapy, like, I need this person's approval, and that was the most counterintuitive thing. And still to this day, I'll talk to, like, Chris, and one of us will say, well, they have to do it this way, and the other guy will go, no, we don't. We do whatever we want. We do whatever we want. This episode, we can just do whatever we want. We can change it, why not? And that's the thing. I still catch myself with that bad habit, but it's, and there's just a million examples, as I said, for the last 30 minutes, so that's the most counterintuitive thing. There was a guy in the back?
Last question.
Yeah, I was wondering, how do you talk about doing all these, tours abroad and wars and stuff, how do you balance your material, talking about things that are important with still being funny? How do you kind of balance the light and the dark in your material in a way that feels relevant?
That's a great question, and that's one of the things in Afghanistan that you see me sort of the arc. That was my first tour. I was wrestling with it, and there was a guy that was a Vietnam vet who was at the time, now he wasn't in the service anymore, but he was working with the Department of Defense, and he was sort of our guide, taking us around, and he was sort of the lead dealing with each person contact at each base. And I remember after a couple of shows saying, I can't relate to these guys. I don't know what, I'm terrified. And he goes, you don't think they're scared? You don't think these 19-year-old kids are scared, who've never left their whatever town, you don't think they're scared? He goes, talk about that. So I find, that's just from being a professional comic all these years, is when I'm struggling, I found the humor in being terrified. I found the humor in, I just made it about myself and about how scared I was, and they found that funny. They love laughing and making fun of civilians, so I would talk about that. And, and I don't need to talk about the politics of the situation, because war is the end result of the failure of politics, and these men and women in uniform, they don't need they're living it every day. They don't need some Hollywood civilian to go, the politics have failed. Like, they're just like, yeah, we got it. I'm living this every day. So I would just find this like, make fun of myself, how scared I was, and I'd make fun of the military because they kind of can't, like the acronyms and the way they talk, and I'd make fun of the officers, and they love that, and then I'd make fun of myself because I was like, oh, these officers are going to make me sleep outside the wire tonight, and I would just do all. It's like doing a private gig. Like, I could sit here up tonight and just do a bunch of podcast jokes that only you guys would get. That's what I do. So, is that the last question? That was it. All right. Thanks, guys. I'm going to head out here.